I just wanted to create this really short video about process clarity and the importance of it, because it's really key that you the automation team, be that the analyst or the developer, knows exactly what the process is so that you know what you're building. So this is why it's so important to have process maps to define what the process steps are, but then also to create a process definition document or a keystroke document to define the micro steps of what the users do. And the reason being is when you create and define the process in the logical steps and decisions, then it's a lot clearer to see where the inefficiencies are and how to improve it. And this is not just for automation, this is for process improvement using lean thinking techniques. So there's three things that you really want to do when defining and optimizing a process. First, you want to map out the process and define what the process actually is and what it does. Then you want to shadow the experts who do the process to make sure that what they say is the process is what they do in practice. And then you also want to have a workshop so that multiple people who do the process, who are experts at the process, come together and form a consensus of what they do and what the process should be. And then that will allow you to standardize the process and optimize it, because you don't want just one person to give you their opinion of what they think the process should be. It should be what is the best way to run this process, standardize it across the team. Then you have something to start from, so then you can work on optimizing the different process steps. So just by defining the process, putting it on paper can make it really clear, makes the improvements immediately obvious. You want to get this process mapped on paper. You want to get it written down on paper, because it's not uncommon that a lot of people just do the process and it's never been written down before. And you may find that different people do things in different ways, and it will become very apparent when new teams come on board that they will find it difficult, that the process experts will find it difficult to train new staff. Even if, say, you work in a coffee shop and there's a process for doing things, process for creating the coffee or creating a meal, if the new person isn't aware, doesn't have experience of that process, and you don't have that process written down, it's going to be very difficult to convey to this new starter how to do something. Because a lot of the time, the process experts, they've done it 1,000 times before. They themselves may have learned from trial and error, and now it's become second nature. And it's called the curse of knowledge, where sometimes it's really hard to explain something very simply to someone very new if it's something that you've done for many years. I myself run these videos to simplify intelligent automation to newbies, to people who are new to automation or have just started on their automation career, so that it's simplified into a way that can be understood by non-professionals. I remember one of my first roles working at a large manufacturing company, and they kept saying, "Oh, you'll learn with experience." But that's great, but I needed to learn now. And it was just a cop-out, because I don't think they really understood it in a way that they could explain. So when defining a process, first you want to understand what the different steps are, the decision points, the logic to make those decisions. For when the processes are just done and not thought out, it may look a lot like, when you start to get into defining what they actually do, you may discover it looks more like a Heath Robinson drawing. There's a lot of wastefulness, there's a lot of pointless and redundant steps. And immediately you will see that there's a lot of ways that this process could be improved. So when improving a process, in lean thinking, there's 5 R's. You could reduce the amount of steps. You could redeploy certain steps to other teams or other people. You could replace the steps, be that replace it with technology. You could remove them altogether because they're redundant, or just by simply reordering the steps can improve the efficiency and the smoothness of a process. Check the links below, as I've created a video on these 5 R's which goes into this in a lot more detail and will help you in optimizing a process. The next step is shadowing and standardizing. So a lot of people may tell you what the process is, or you may have documentation on what the process should be, but when you actually shadow or sit next to a process expert and watch as they do the process, you may realize that what's written down or even what they've told you is not really what they do. What's written down may be old and redundant due to the changes that have been made in the technology or the process itself. And when people tell you things, they may skip steps because everything's so obvious, inherently obvious to them, because they've been doing it for so long. This is why shadowing a person and watch them do the process is very important. In fact, it's vital to knowing exactly what's done. So when you're shadowing someone, you become their apprentice and you just ask why about everything pretty much. You try and understand why they did this different steps, why they made different decisions, what happens if they did it this way instead of that way, getting a whole full understanding of, intense training on that process. But it's also a good idea to shadow multiple people. Like I said before, different people may do processes in different ways, especially if it hasn't been written down before. It's a free-for-all and people are just doing it the best way they know how. So by talking with multiple people, shadowing multiple people, seeing how they do it in different ways, you can bring them together in a workshop later on to find the best way. That should become the standard as is way. So the next step is optimization. And this is best done in a workshop, because in a workshop you have multiple opinions and ideas and cross-pollination of ideas and validation of opinions. Rather than just working with one person who's an expert, multiple experts can come together to discuss the best way that this process should be. And this is called the 2B process. What they want to achieve to make this process, to optimize this process. But before you get to the 2B, you want to look at the as-is and say, okay, what are the issues? Where are the errors and where are the blockers? What are the process changes? Is there anything that's technically going to change with this process or the underlying applications which are being used? You want to find the technology or the solutions that fit the problem. You don't want to make the process fit the technology. If you have this technology that we've bought, we want to kind of fit this process in to make it work. You want to make the process work. The process is the main objective. The optimizing of the process is the main objective. And that's where a lot of teams can get into this issue where they're matching processes to technologies that aren't suitable. So by using different lean thinking techniques, and there's loads of videos that we've created on this about how to do that, you can start to optimize this process. So you define the process, you understand exactly what the process is, the as-is process, then you can identify where the wastes are, you can pull out where the issues and blockers are, then you have a good understanding of where you can now optimize this process. And this is optimizing it even before you've considered technologies. Then you can look at bringing in technologies to further optimize a streamlined approach. So in the world of automation, it's so important to automate a process that you've optimized and streamlined. Because if you automate a process as is, you may be automating inherent issues and problems that exist within that process. So I hope that little bit of information was useful for you at looking at the importance of defining a process first before you optimize it, because you need to know where to start before you can determine where you want to get to. If there's any questions that you had for me or any comments on these videos, write your thoughts in the comments below and I'd like to read that and I can get more content out to you. Do take a look at these other videos that we have. I'll leave them in the description on different techniques that you can use to optimize, to define the process and then optimize it. Alright guys, you take care.